everybody, welcome to today's episode of Making the Past Present. We will be making something called a Duke of Cumberland Pudding. Don't you just love 18th century names? So come join me as we make a fun and interesting pudding. What we think of sort of like a pudding, only their puddings were usually boiled and they came out more like a cake. And they had savory puddings, they had sweet puddings, they had in-between puddings, and puddings were usually meant for the poor people in society, for the easier ones like a hasty pudding, because it was quick, fast, easy, and cheap on ingredients. However, puddings also started to become a little fancier with all kinds of sugar thrown in and butter and fruits and fancy different types of sauces. It is usually equal parts sugar, butter, and alcohol. We'll deal with that later in the video because we're going to make that later on. But today we're going to make something called the Duke of Cumberland Pudding. It has apples in it, and I'm going to put cranberries in it instead of currants. I've tried it with currants, which are basically a tiny, tiny grape. But I found it to be too sweet. I liked the tart of the cranberry and I liked the tart of the apple. And we'll talk about the cranberries in a minute. So to get started, you want to take about 2 medium-sized apples and you want to shred them. I pre-shredded mine because it's a lot easier to take to an event pre-shredded. It saves me a couple of steps and some time. I would suggest doing that at home if you're going to be making this at an event, because like I said, it just makes your life easier. But you want to core them and you want to peel them, and then on the largest side of your shredder, you want to shred them. If you look on like your cheese grater, there's usually different sizes. You want the largest one. You want to have, when you are done, about 2 cups of shredded apple. Err on having more than less, because the more apple, the sweeter it will taste. To that, you want to add about 6 ounces of butter. Now the original recipe calls for lard. I prefer using butter because I can get it a lot easier than I can lard. It travels better and it's less expensive than buying a tub of lard that I'm going to be using almost all of it per recipe. So take your butter and you want to chop it up as fine as you possibly can, like I did here. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. It'll be a little messy, but that's what makes it fun. Now while you're starting to put together your pudding, what you want to have going also at the same time is some type of deep pot that you can hold water in, because your water needs to be boiling before you put your pudding in. Now, that said, you also want to have a second pot, like you can see behind me, that also has water in it, because as your pudding boils for 2 hours, your pot will lose water. You want to be able to pour water in, but you don't want to cool your water down as you go, so you need boiling water. To that, you want to add 6 ounces of sugar. Now, if you're at home, you can weigh it out. If you're in an event, if you have some way to weigh it, you can. Or here's something else you can do. It's 1 1/3 cups. So you take 1 1/3 cups of sugar. This is a jack. It is a measuring cup that you can buy if you want. It's 1/4 of a cup. You can also find, when I first got started, I found a mug that I would drink out of and had multiple ones. You can take it home, fill it with water to figure out how much it holds. Then if you're really brave or have someone that you know, they can mark the measurements on the side of the cup, and then not only do you have your drinking cup, but you also have a measuring cup if you don't want to buy the individual cups, which you can do. I will put the sources for them down below because it's easier than remembering everybody that sells them. There's a lot of people who sell them. So you want 1 1/3 cups of sugar. Now the fun part is counting all of the sugar you need. Also want 1 1/3 cups of flour. There. 6 eggs, if I don't drop them all. Just doing that. At some events, they will have a space that you can dump your food scraps. Sometimes they will have a compost pile. If you ask ahead, they may let you dump things in it. Some places won't do not like you to throw food away in their trash cans until the end of the weekend, or to burn it. I like to burn mine because it helps keep animals down, except for meat scraps. But just ask. Everybody likes to do it different at an event. Okay, then to this, I also need to add, it calls for nutmeg. I prefer cinnamon in it, but you can do it however you want. These are flexible. That looks good enough. So the recipe says to throw your currants, or in this case I'm using dehydrated cranberries. You can buy these at almost any store. You can buy them online. Try to find the unsweetened. The tart adds a really nice contrast to the sweet apple and the amount of sugar that is in this. I get mine at Aldi's because they have the best price and I think they taste the best, and they are unsweetened. They don't have additives on them. You get what you can get a hold of. Holiday time, they can be a little difficult, so you find them where you can find them. But the recipe says to mix them in now. What I am actually going to do is I'm going to wait, because when you tend to mix it all together, put it in your pudding bag and boil it, the fruit tends to, especially berries like this or currants, will tend to sink to the bottom and make a nice line at the bottom. I want mine to be dispersed throughout, so what I'm going to do is mix everything together without the cranberries, put it into my pudding bag, and when I'm just getting ready to put it into the boiling water, sprinkle the cranberries on top, tie it, and then put it in hopes, fingers crossed, that it helps disperse it all the way through. We'll see. It might not work, it might, but it's worth a shot. So let's mix this all together. It will be lumpy, it won't be very nice looking. You'll see. So this is what it'll look like when it is done. I will tell you, the more shredded apple you put in it, the little chunkier it will be, which is perfectly fine. And yes, you want the butter to stay in chunks. Let's set that to the side. Now let's get our pudding bag together. I went to the store and I bought the cotton flour sack towels because they're great. You can reuse them over and over and over again, and they can also help you do dishes when you're at an event. So what you want to do is you want to get it wet. Put it in another bowl. Then you're going to take your butter and you're going to want to sort of grease your cloth. Now the reason you want to do that is it helps to fill in all the holes of your cloth so that your pudding doesn't want to come out, and two, it also helps the pudding come out of said cloth once it is cool enough to touch. Now it's a messy job, it's not perfect, you just kind of hope that you get all of it on there. You'll be able to tell if you do or do not. Just keep going. This is a great job for the kids to do if you don't mind them getting messy. So we'll call that done. Make sure your cloth stays in. Then you're going to want to take just a little bit of your flour and sprinkle it on the inside as well. It'll do the same thing, not a lot. It doesn't take much. You might have some extra. This is where it's great if you're outside, because you can take it and just kind of shake it real quick and it'll go flying everywhere. But since I'm not outside, I'm going to just kind of dump it gently onto my board, and I can use that for a different recipe later. So there we go. Now you're going to want to dump your pudding in. Get it all in there. And I'll have the source at the bottom of where I get my redware and all of that kind of stuff. Now you also want to have some natural twine. You use butcher's twine. I'm using jewelry hemp twine. It works. But you want to have a long enough piece that you can pull your cloth up, tie it, and leave a tail out, whether you tie it to the top of your arm or something like that, where it helps make it easier to pull the pudding out. So I'm going to take, you can always make it shorter once you tie your pudding up. I'm going to cut that so it's a little easier to do. Now I already have my cranberries here, so I guessed at what 6 ounces looked like. Again, if you happen to know what your package weighed, you can guess from that. If you're at home, you can wait, or you can say that looks like enough. I'm just going to sprinkle them across the top, try and evenly disperse them because I like my cranberries in this. So I'm going to put extra. You can put extra, you can put less. You can put a different fruit if you want. You can do raisins if you like. Like I said, I like the tart, but you want them to be dehydrated because the extra moisture in fresh fruit will mess the pudding up. So you want to gather the ends and you want to get as close down to the pudding as you possibly can. I can already see some of my cranberries starting to sink. So you take the end and you want to tie it as close to the pudding as you can. I'm gonna wrap it a couple of times just to make sure it stays. It doesn't have to be perfect, but a couple of simple knots just to make sure it holds. Now, when you go to put this in, you want to be careful and you want to make sure, try not to spill the water over. I like to roll the top up a little bit because then it's, one, easier to drop in, but it's also not hanging over and I'm less likely to catch something on fire. So very gently put it into your boiling water. Take your tail, tie it someplace or wrap it someplace where it's not going to burn. But again, you can easily get to your pudding. Now we wait 2 hours. The pudding has boiled for 2 hours. I have let it cool where I can easily touch it. So what I'm going to do is very carefully try to cut the string off. Like I said, try. There we go. Maybe. There we go. There's the string. Now comes the fun part of unveiling the pudding. So it looks like the cranberries still stayed on one side. Oh well. And it might stick to the bag just a little bit, but don't worry about it, that's fine. But there is the finished pudding. So to go with the pudding, you want to make a very good sauce. It is equal parts butter, sugar, and some type of alcohol. Instead of alcohol, I am using apple cider. So I have a half a stick of butter in here, which is about 2 ounces. So then about 1/3 of a cup of sugar and about 1/3 of a cup of apple cider. I'm going to stick it over my coals and let it melt, and then I'll pour it over the pudding and we'll have pudding. Sure. The sauce is done. So I'm going to take my pumpkin, and I've already got some pudding sliced. I'm going to carefully, without dropping it hopefully, carefully pour just a little bit of the sauce over, and this is really hot. And there you go. Duke of Cumberland pudding with a butter sauce. Thank you for joining me today on Making the Past Present. I hope you had fun. I hope to see you again, and safe travels till we meet up. Not with it being this hot, I'm not. I am now. Oh, that's good. Oh, it's horrible. You guys can't have any. I'll finish it. I'll suffer. It's my fault. It's mine. It's mine. Okay, you can shut it off. Past
You're
present.
supposed to do your ending.
I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you really, really try this. Till we meet again, safe travels. I'm gonna go eat now. This is really good.